This is the Drake Insights Podcast, your weekly dose of cutting-edge senior living marketing insights. Join me, your host, Natasha Drake, for bold ideas, proven strategies, and inspiring stories straight from the experts. Tune in and let's conquer the senior living marketing landscape together. Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Drake Insights Podcast. I am your host, Natasha Drake from Drake Strategic. Let's get started. So on today's episode, we're going to continue down the sales path as we have the past couple weeks. And I want to talk a little bit today about the future of sales. What are sales teams doing, especially as we've talked in the past couple weeks with the boomers emerging, that group coming in, all the advances in technology. There's just so much change, as we've talked about, going on right now in our industry. What is going on at the front lines with the sales teams, right? Because we did a lot of talking about marketing and how everything's changing with digital and online tools. But what is the sales process like? I know relationship building is as important as ever, but how do we continue to do that? How do we continue to coach sales teams to do that the right way with all these new advances of technology, with this new boomer generation, with their adult children, which are also a different generation? It's a different world. And so I brought on our sales expert, Kelly Myers from KJB Consulting. She recently wrote a book, if you haven't heard, called The More You Know, The More You Close. And I want her to come on today and join me to just really dig into this topic and hear from her what she's seeing and what she expects to see in the future. So welcome, Kelly, to the podcast. Thank you for joining. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself today.
Sure. Thank you so much, Natasha. And it's exciting to be here. It's exciting to get to talk about the book a little bit, but more importantly, it's just exciting to think about what do the sales teams need to make sure that they can do the best jobs that they can with every customer who walks through their door. But yeah, I have a long history of being in senior living. I started out actually at the community level here in Ohio, which is where I live, doing external business development for a new open, and had really the pure joy of being able to advance my career with Sunrise Senior Living throughout the 23 years that I was there. It still sounds so odd to me to say the 23 years that I was there. But, with Sunrise, I had the opportunity to be not only a community-based salesperson, but a regional director of sales, an area vice president. And the last 13 years I was there, I was the senior vice president of sales. And probably maybe the honor of my life. That could sound hokey sometimes, but really you think about, for all of us who are leaders, how many people we impact just day to day with what we say, what we write, how we respond and react. And honestly, to be trusted for that long to do that was really an honor for me. Once I left Sunrise, I had two other of the team members that I worked with at Sunrise also depart Sunrise around the same time that I did. And together, right, we were like, remember when we always said, if we got to make the rules, what we would do and what we thought was important. And so Bridget Specht and Jessica Fopp, my business partners, together we decided that we were really lucky, right, to have the kind of infrastructure that we had at Sunrise to really support what we thought was important throughout our coaching and our training journey with AIR. And we thought to ourselves, you don't really need all that infrastructure to do that. You really just need a solid understanding of what training really matters and how do you make that training stick through coaching. And to be able to bring that to providers of any size, I think has been really exciting so far. And it's nice to work with companies as well that can really get their hands wrapped around the business, because it's not as large as a company like Brookdale or Atria or Sunrise Senior Living. Those are great as well. But it's been fun sort of seeing the other side of the coin with some of the smaller operators.
Yeah, and you get a little more, as I've seen from my side, a little more hands-on approach and touch. You get more of you to help coach your sales team. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. If you share a little bit about your book. So I'm interested to learn, so how did this come about? And tell us a little more about what's in it.
Yeah, sure. It has been a journey for sure. And not somebody who ever thought that I would write a book. Was egged on a little bit by my partners and some other folks that I know just to kind of get started and see what would happen with it. And I would recommend anybody to consider writing a book, whether you publish it or not. The way it helped me to really define the things that I believed are truly important when it comes to the customer experience in senior living, it helps you to really bring that to a fine point. And it's been a long process. It's been probably just about a year, but just going through and considering, what are the things that might be table stakes and you think everybody's already doing in sales, but they're not. And when you think about the size of teams, and this is something that I think we'll talk about, Natasha, in a little bit here when we talk about the sales teams and structure
Mm-hmm.
of the future, really thinking about how can sales team members really think through a way to have curiosity driven sales,
Mm-hmm.
to genuinely want to get to know what's going on with the people that are walking through their doors, the people who are calling them and asking for help, and really thinking through how do you curate an experience for them that's going to meet them where they are. And I think for those of us who have been in senior living for a long time, especially your community based sellers, the stories are similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the families come in, the stories can be a little similar. And it can be easy maybe to kind of fall into the, oh, yeah, I know what to do next
Mm-hmm.
trap. And I think that that's a real tipping point, right? The person who can keep themselves from going down that path and to say, hey, this person is a lot more than just somebody who cannot live at home anymore, who lost their husband, whose children live across the country. They're more than just those things.
Mm-hmm.
And really encouraging people to, what I would say, slow down to go fast in the process. So the book is not a sales process book. There are plenty of sales process books out
Mm-hmm.
there. It's actually a book that just talks about curiosity driven techniques that will allow you to uncover more about your customers, which is going to allow you to really tie the benefits of what you offer specifically to them.
Wow. No,
Yeah.
and that kind of takes me to my next
Yeah.
question. That's really helpful because a lot of times that doesn't come naturally to everyone.
Yeah.
If you're kind of nervous and someone's coming in, how do you
Right.
dig deep? How do you communicate? So that brings me to
Yeah.
my next question is
Yeah.
that ties perfectly to the next generation that we're talking about. So,
Yeah.
when I was doing sales 10 years ago, it was a little bit different of a prospect, right? You were more of your adult children was who you were working
Mm-hmm.
with. But now with the boomer generation, at least in my experience, don't want to be sold to, right?
Yeah.
Don't really respond the same way to marketing as they used
Yep.
to or the sales techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Their adult children, like I mentioned, are younger than they were. And they're, again,
Yep.
very digitally savvy. So there's a
Yep.
lot more texting. I would think a little bit less personal with the automation and the
Yeah.
websites and self research and chatbots and all those things.
Yeah.
How have you seen, in your experience recently, or how do you foresee this sales process changing a little bit in the future?
Yeah. Yeah. First, to your point, I don't think anybody wants to be sold to.
Mhm. It's
And
true.
I know I don't. And when you think about what you're actually doing, you are selling something because there's going to be an exchange of money for services, right? That's
Mhm.
a sales process. But being able to go beyond that, right, with some of the tools that we now have. The changes in marketing just in the last 5 years in the senior living space is extraordinary. I think back to, pre COVID and thinking about, we didn't even use video for conversations with families.
Mm.
I mean, most of us didn't
Right.
do any of that
Mhm.
prior to COVID, where we were all forced to use that as a tool.
Mhm.
Marketing, however, though, they got a huge kickstart. And I think that we're still sort of struggling with how do you balance, right? The marketing engine that can help to nurture leads, can help to curate qualified leads, can help to make sure that, you're staying on task, quite frankly, with what families are going to want to know.
Mhm.
Partnering that right with the salesperson's then relationship based built trust, it can be hard. And honestly, I think, at least in my experience, initially, right, as we started to make some of those changes, it can also feel a little scary to the salesperson, right? All of a sudden, someone else, mystery, someone else, right,
Mhm.
who's the AI version of what's going on, is now connecting with my customers.
Mhm.
And now I have a fear, right, that what's going on here? How do I know how do I know what that lead nurture campaign looks like? Even though we know it comes to them, but it feels a little funny, especially for folks who have been in senior living for quite a while.
Yeah.
And and I think too, and I'll talk a little bit about this probably in a bit, but I think we have to be really careful to not let automation, no matter how great it is, lead the sales process.
Right.
And, I'll give you an example of that. I just, for a client, did 10 mystery shops. And in that, we purposefully went through their website to assess sort of time to connect, quality of connections, quality of curiosity and learning before we got there. Of the 10 buildings, I think there were 2 that made phone calls, sort of ask more questions, really get to understand what would be the best use of our time while we're there to tour. And all the other 8, we got the confirmation for the tour, and then we got a reminder email that was automated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I don't say that necessarily, it's not really a criticism. I think it's just the reality of what the salespeople are dealing with now, with lots of leads coming in
Mm-hmm.
and lots of pressure to close sales today, this week. Make sure I have a positive week when I'm talking to my regional team and they're talking to their leaders and they're talking to their leaders. And I think that pressure, right? There's a cross section in there that we really have to better understand to make sure that we don't lean totally into automation and we don't ignore what can really help us through the sales process. So I think when you talk about change for sales team members, even thinking about the profile of the person that you're hiring,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like all this tech savvy stuff, right? You really need to understand it so you can build a relationship using the advantages that you now have.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. I think I hear that a lot from the marketing side when I come in and we
Yeah.
talk about the chatbot and the marketing automation. And I was one of those people, and those listening that know me, that when I was on the
Yeah.
sales side, I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want a chatbot. I don't know if I like that. I had that
Yeah.
fear of I want to
Yeah.
be able to create that relationship. But you're right,
Right.
because of so many paid digital leads coming in, there's a huge influx in leads, and there used to be
Yeah.
before. And so you have to have some help. And how
Yeah.
do we, and I spend time too partnering with sales teams to how do we partner to what
Yeah.
you're doing and what's happening on the marketing side and use it for your benefit to what you're saying. So you still have to
Absolutely.
build that relationship, but
Right.
maybe some of these tools are really cool. So some of the chatbot tools and the information you get ahead of
Yeah.
that call, like
Absolutely.
I think if I had that, 10 years ago, how great
Yeah.
that would be. So I
Yeah.
like what you're saying about making sure that they're using it to their benefit, not separate,
Right.
not relationship building versus digital. Okay, well,
Right.
let's use those tools, and how do we coach sales teams? So it kind of takes me to my next question is, what are you recommending for sales teams and operators to help their sales teams better understand this and not stay on that same path, but understand how to move forward with this new process?
Yeah, absolutely. We did a presentation at Smash not too long ago. And one of the things we were talking about was building the sales team of the future.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a quick story that I told. So I started in senior living in 1999. When I started, I did external sales and my partner did internal sales. I worked in the community 2 days a week because she, of course, needed 2 days a week off. Catapult yourself to 2024. It's effectively the same sales structure. And compare that to the leaps and bounds that marketing has grown, yet we are still in a place in many organizations where you have sort of a one-person shop, and that sole salesperson is expected to do business development and generate qualified leads, create events that are going to be compelling enough for some of your leads to actually want to come and get into the building, all the move-in paperwork, their lead-based management. We'll talk about that a little bit because that's the thing that sometimes goes to the
Mm-hmm.
wayside in
Mm-hmm.
this, right? And keeping up with all of their KPIs, right? Making enough phone calls, keeping their promises to customers and making sure that they're doing what they say they're going to do. And so you compare what marketing's been able to do, and really the sales structure has been left behind, in my opinion. It's a unicorn you're looking for if you want somebody who's really great at that list of things I just gave, because those people don't exist. In addition, if they say they exist, they're not happy doing all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're not great at all that stuff. And so then, you find yourself in a position where someone might be great at one aspect, not great at the others. And now you've got a situation where you potentially can have turnover.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't want them to leave, they don't feel like they're making the kind of difference that they could.
Yeah.
And most people attracted to our industry are the people who want to make a difference. So, I think your question, what kind of advice do you have? I think it's a big dose of reality. to understand that the boomers are going to expect so much more.
Mm-hmm.
We've always talked about time to connect, right? And one of the gals on the panel, Christy Ballard, had shared time to connect is important, but quality and consistency of the connection is more important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she really hit it on the head, right? Because it's not about just making all of those calls as fast as you can. It's about really thinking through and how are you going to best meet the needs of this person.
Mm-hmm.
And so really thinking through, does your structure work for the customer? Not necessarily does it work for the community. Does it work for the customer? Are your salespeople there when customers are most likely to call? Maybe walk in. Well, there's not a ton of those these days. Most often want to set appointments.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking past, right, the work that the salesperson has to do that is the administrative component. It's part of what they do. Usually it's the ticket to the dance, right? You got to do that to get to do the rest.
Mm-hmm.
But really thinking about, is the cost that you're paying for a sales professional, should that person be using their time to do work that somebody who might be a BOC, a business office coordinator of the future, and would love doing that kind of administrative work? And in that time where being an assistant, right, they're likely going to be at a lower cost for the company. But yet they're going to be excellent maybe at what they do, which frees up your salesperson to close more sales. So I think it's about really thinking through, what do we need to do to ensure that all of our customers are getting what they need when they need it and in the platform in which they want it?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that was going to be, yeah, I'm going to kind of jump right to that then.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think I can't imagine being a salesperson, and this is proven now, the amount of time it takes, the amount of touches it takes. I don't remember the number. It's like tripled what it used to be, right? We
Yeah.
know how long that process takes,
Yeah.
plus the influx of digital leads
Yeah.
all coming in at once,
Yeah.
plus working the CRM,
Yeah.
planning then for your next step. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't imagine having to do all of that. So what do
Yeah.
you kind of touched on it, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask, what
Yeah.
do you recommend then? What do you recommend these operators do? I mean, is it truly hiring different people, like you're saying, for each part of this process? I mean, it kind of sounds like it, because your marketing
Yeah.
team also, a lot of times it's like, well, you guys do the social media. Well, we know that when marketing from the agency level does a lot of
Yeah.
that, it's less personal, right? So you
Right.
can't, some of it has to be done in-house from the
Absolutely.
community. So I would love to hear, what is your recommendation on that? Because I completely agree with
Yeah.
you.
No, actually, I'll put a big exclamation point on it because it is a sort of a stake in the sand that I really believe in.
Mhm.
If you want to have great occupancy performance in your building, the people who need to be engaged in the work that creates that need to be in an environment in which they can thrive.
Mm.
If I am great at building personal connections with prospective customers, if I am great at really being able to dig into that emotional journey you have to take with them, I may not be great at business development.
Mm.
And the more you set your KPIs that I have to do 5 appointments every week, the more they're forced to do that, they're going to go someplace else. And then your training dollars that you've just spent on this person, now another organization is taking advantage of that because they may have a structure that allows them to do that, to really
Mhm.
focus on what they're great at, what they love to do. You have to love to do this work because it's hard. It's
Mhm.
hard to listen to difficult stories, ask really curious questions that are on point, make sure that you are staying aligned with the customer. That's hard work. And the pressure having to do the things you're not good at and you don't like to do. Doesn't mean you couldn't be good at them, but even then you don't like to do it. So I do think having a fresh perspective on what are the duties, right, that have to be done on a consistent basis to make sure that we win at the occupancy game.
Mhm.
And so thinking about right from the start, right, the VSAs that are out there anymore, they're fabulous, right? I
Mhm.
mean, they do a nice job of really connecting right away. Some of them are asking great questions where you feel like, gosh, maybe there is somebody typing on the other end of this. Others, not so much.
Right.
But thinking about, how do you leverage that in a way that allows your customer to feel like they're getting what they want when they want it? I know many companies right now are thinking about call centers
Mhm.
to make sure, right, that you can partner that human connection with what just happened with the VSA
Mhm.
and being able to get there much more quickly. And so I know some have built internal sort of call centers. Some are using some of the great partners that are out there that have call centers. And And if you can partner that in a way that the person on the other end of the phone at the call center sounds and feels very much like your brand and what they would get if it was your community-based seller making that phone call, that's going to get you really far ahead of your competitors, right?
Mhm.
So I've engaged and I've quickly engaged verbally. So I'm building that relationship alongside what the VSA can do. So that I think is something that people really need to take into consideration. I think when you go beyond that, I do think, as I said earlier, there are profiles of people who would love to do the administrative part of the sales job.
Mhm.
And when you think about bench strength for your other community positions, this is somebody who would probably make a great BOC down the road, business office coordinator.
Mhm.
Also, the rate of pay is going to be different.
Right.
Um, it just is, right? I mean, it's an assistant position versus somebody who's in that primary sales role.
Mhm.
I think additionally, having somebody who's really great at business development and whether that person can really do a great job for the whole market, which brings a lot of continuity to your brand. You have one voice out there, right? Sharing with professional referral sources what it is that you do, how you can help them to be even better at what they do in regards to the care that you provide your residents.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I was in this, well, take a step back. When I was doing some mystery shops, I'm going to agree with a lot that you're saying. What
Yeah.
happens is the call sometimes goes to the front desk, right? Because adult children are
Mhm.
calling when they
Yep.
can, at night,
Right.
after their kids are in bed, after everything's over, the soccer games, right?
Right.
A lot of times, and even boomers too, right? If they're still
Yeah.
working, they're working much
Absolutely.
later in life, right? So later
Right.
at night, if you don't have someone true backup too on your team, and I'm not talking just a lot of times that they just say goes to the front desk or there's someone at the front
Right.
desk who's trained. I would say 9 out of 10 of the mystery shops I've done too, they are
Yeah.
not trained properly.
No.
It's taking a name and a number. It's not understanding that. I mean, the sales process is hard. It's not easy, and not
Absolutely.
everyone can do
Mm-mm.
it. So I'm still seeing that today, and we
Yeah.
know that they're online. We know we have these automated tools, like you're saying.
Yep.
They're getting the virtual sales assistant. They're getting those chat bots.
Yep.
They're going in. They're filling out the forms. Someone needs to be communicating
Yeah.
with them in a positive way, like you said, to really
Yep.
communicate your brand and what your community
Right.
offers in a strong way. So I agree. I think that's concerning that is still the process for the past, would you say, 25 years,
Right.
and what are we doing to make changes to that? And we have to be able to put money in. I talked about this on the marketing episode, put money
Yeah.
into those digital efforts. We
Right.
have to also be putting money into the right team, like you're saying, to support each of those
Absolutely.
disciplines. Because you're right, someone who's really good at tech and digital and marketing, maybe social media, maybe the CRM, the data
Yeah.
analytics. It's another thing
Yep.
that we talked about a
Yep.
couple weeks ago. Who's analyzing that data from the CRM? That person probably isn't the same person who's more of a people person, outgoing, likes to
Yeah.
build relationships, likes to sit and talk, and really can create those connections. Those are different people.
Absolutely.
And so how is one person, like you said, the likelihood of one person having all of those
Yeah.
skills and being able to have the time to do all
Yep.
those things is just not
Agree.
feasible. So what you're saying is, just to recap,
Yep.
is that operators need to change that, filling those
Really.
positions, change the model of their
Yes.
sales team. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, turnover is a huge problem in our industry at most of the positions. It is specifically high in the sales position. And, there's a piece of that, I think, that to what you just said, it's just hard work.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to sit every day in stories that people are struggling to tell you because they carry this enormous amount of guilt, sadness, loss. They're
Mhm.
answering very intimate questions about someone that they love to a total stranger at this point. That's hard. So that alone, right, can create a bit of turnover because it's heavy, can be really heavy work. But when you compound that by not having the right tools or structure, you consider all of your training dollars that you invested in that person now, there is another organization benefiting from that right now
Mm.
because they didn't have maybe the same kind of
Mhm.
infrastructure or sales training that you had. And so what they just bought was a fully loaded professional salesperson that they don't necessarily have to have the same kind of infrastructure to get the same level of success.
Mhm. I do want to talk a little
Mm.
bit, if we can. You mentioned to me, I think a couple weeks ago when we spoke about challenges you're seeing in the industry. And I want to talk a little bit about that because you're kind of touching on the time it takes to nurture the lead. So right now with
Right.
digital world we're
Mm-hmm.
living in, we hear a couple things we hear from sales teams. We want more leads, but also these digital leads aren't qualified. And they want to keep getting new leads because these leads
Yeah.
aren't any good. These leads aren't going to come in. It's this weird mix of wanting more leads, but the digital leads that are coming in aren't qualified because it's a different
Yeah.
process. And so I want to talk a little bit about that challenge of two things. One is, how are we coaching and teaching these sales team members who maybe have been doing this for 20
Mm-hmm.
years that the digital lead you're working, it's a different process than it was 10 years ago, and
Yeah.
what is that process? And then number two is you still need to nurture differently
Yeah.
the leads you have in your
Yeah.
database. So kind of asking you a lot of questions at once, but
Yeah.
that's the challenge. I know you shared with me. How do we do that? How do we coach
Yeah.
them on both of those things?
Yeah. No, they're two really good points. And I would say first, you don't probably need more leads.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean you don't want more leads. It doesn't mean that, of course, you've got sort of a general rate that you can expect of new lead generation that comes from your business
Pipeline.
development and your
Mm-hmm.
marketing efforts. But often we have hundreds of prospective residents
Yeah.
and families sitting in your lead base who have already raised their hand, and we're not keeping the promises that were made to them when they initially contacted us. And to go out a bit on a limb here, I would say that that kind of behavior is often related to the way leadership interacts with the community based salesperson in what good looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example of that, right? For the most part, we are rewarded on a week to week basis. And the reward and the accolades that you get are the sale you closed today.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And you should be. But the second part of the conversation needs to be, and tell me who else you've been working with. And maybe is there somebody that feels a little stuck that we could work on? Because that's going to be our future move in maybe 6 months from now, but still a really important move in. And so when you have the whirlwind that goes on in a community and you're in a career where 1 out of 4 is a win from a success perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and you're only really rewarded for being on top of the rack and stack for the week, it becomes the likelihood of maybe doing what is the harder work, which is reconnecting with people in your lead base, is going to be left behind
Mm-hmm.
because you're not necessarily rewarded for doing that work when the work needs to be done. You're only rewarded when that work pays off as a move-in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get you what you want. And I do need new leads because I need people walking in the door that have an urgent need, which you can have an operator come on here and talk about how that drives community turnover
Right.
and the acuity in your building,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm sure they'd have plenty to say about because I would too. So I think so there's that, right? I think the second part of that, and if there's anyone from marketing out there listening to this today, if you have the silver bullet, I would love to hear it. Generally, when we think about how do you replicate the success that we've had, and this goes to your question about social media,
Mm-hmm.
those leads aren't good.
Mm-hmm.
I need new leads, but I don't want the leads that you're giving me. We have always been in a situation where we put all of our stock in what I would call last touch attribution. So the last thing the prospective customer did is the only thing we have down as the lead source.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been lots of other parts of the journey that we weren't privy to at that point. So social media is a great example. Yes, everybody, I've heard in my experience, Facebook leads are bad leads.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
No, they're not. Ask better questions, try to figure out what they need, right? But likely, Facebook wasn't the only place
Right.
they looked at, right? They didn't go onto Facebook and say, find me a senior living community.
Right.
I think that as we work with our marketing partners, finding a way to track journeys
Yeah.
that we don't often see becomes so critical to where there's not just one lead source.
Mm-hmm.
And when you only have the last touch lead source, building a sales and marketing plan that's going to help to boast future move-ins is almost impossible because that last lead source is not necessarily was the
Right.
most important or the most influential lead source. So
Yeah.
I think that's where sales and marketing really need to partner
Yep.
on trying to figure out where are customers learning?
Yep.
Because that's what you have to tackle. Where are they learning? Not just how did they connect with us, but where are they getting their information from so we can get ourselves there and make sure that we are framing the information that the senior is getting early in their journey of making this decision.
Yeah, I think I do want to touch on that because that's something that a big proponent of what I do. And I want to talk a little bit about that because that
Okay.
is different. It used to be very much, even 10 years ago, lead source analysis. This is how
Mm-hmm.
they came in. And so you would message that tactic, right, a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked about this before. Everything is omni-channel, and everyone says that. No, it truly is. Like when you have one, say it's an event or whatever it is you're doing, you have to have a strong message on all 10 of your different platforms, the different ways mediums are going to be
Right.
coming to you. Because you're right. I mean, 9
Yeah.
times out of 10, they probably got something in the mail, of course, right? But that
Yeah.
they didn't convert from that. So a lot of times I
Right.
hear that too. Direct mail doesn't work, and I'm like, they got it. It just took
Yeah.
them 4 different steps and different journeys. Maybe they
Absolutely.
went on your website. Maybe their daughter went on your website.
Right.
Maybe then they went to social media and
Yeah.
converted. Maybe they went to your website and converted. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
converted, which you see a lot. I'm sure you're seeing 5
Yeah.
different places, the same
Yeah.
lead. And so maybe
Yes.
you're getting that lead that calls late at night, or it's coming from the website or coming from Facebook, and you hear it's not
Yeah.
qualified. This could be the 6th time they're
Right.
hearing about you. So you're right. The marketing tactics and strategy and planning are completely different. So it
Yeah.
has to be married to the sales
Yeah.
strategy, and they need to partner. We need to work together to make sure. I always want to make sure when I work with sales teams, they know everything that's being
Right.
done. They're a part of that process.
Right.
What the message we're saying on the marketing side needs to be the same message you're saying. The tone,
Yes.
how you talk to your prospects, it needs to work together so that they feel confident. And okay, I know
Mm-hmm.
this, I know all the things that my prospect is seeing before they come to
Yes.
me. That needs to happen. The fact that it isn't happening still today, it blows my
Right.
mind. And it's a lot
Right.
better than it used to be, but
Mm-hmm.
that needs to be a partnership to help the sales team feel more confident and so that they don't just say these aren't qualified leads. They understand,
Yeah.
okay, this may be the 6th touch. It's finally
Yeah.
come to me. I understand that. And I understand the
Mm-hmm.
process of how. And then now, how have I been coached? How do I understand how to then nurture that
Right.
lead through this very long process? It's a very, I mean,
Yeah.
depending on which kind of community, life plan, it can be
Mm-hmm.
a very, very long process of build. And especially with boomers, trust has been eroded. You have to
Yes.
build that trust, build that
Yeah.
relationship. I mean, I don't want to say it's more work than it was before, but it kind of is because of all the noise, because of
Yeah.
everything going on in the marketing world. So it's a
Absolutely.
lot for sales teams to be able to do that by themselves and to be able to be coached effectively by
Yeah.
whomever.
Yeah. No question. No question. I think that kind of a forgotten part of all this is the experience they have from a marketing perspective before they become a resident, and the experience they have with your sales professional. That frames the experience they believe they're going to have when they move in.
Yeah.
And marketing is really great, right, at identifying your brand voice and making sure that they're leveraging that in a consistent way across all of the platforms, right, that they are focused on.
Mm-hmm.
Sales needs to be married with that because there's this internal piece, right? When people will say, "Why did you pick there?" And they'll say, "Oh, it was a feel. I just felt right."
Mm-hmm.
Well, why they didn't pick there is also a feel. It
Right.
didn't feel right. And in those times when you don't find a smooth intersection from here's everything I learned about you, and then here's everything I've experienced now that I'm talking to a human, does that match up? And from a sales perspective, are we keeping it top of mind what I'll say it again, what they experience during the sales process leads directly to what they believe they're going to get when they move in. So when I tell you that the executive director is going to give you a call tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
because we know that there's a lot of stuff that you're learning and we feel it's really important that you get to talk to Natasha today, our executive director.
Mm-hmm.
I know you get to meet her, but she's going to give you a little bit of time and then talk to you. And then Natasha doesn't call,
Yep.
you don't keep your promises. You don't
Yep.
keep your promises. You pride yourself on personalization in the care process. Many of the communities have those shadow boxes outside of the
Mm-hmm.
rooms where people
Mm-hmm.
put fun stuff in them. Well, little itty bitty thing. You say you offer personalized, you walk by and everybody's thing looks exactly the same.
Right.
There are these little things that validate the brand through experience that we kind of mess that up all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we always think about it in the way that we should, to put top of mind what I do means what we'll do.
Yeah.
And we want that to be warm, comforting, caring. You want it to be all those things. And when we don't call people back when we say we're going to, we don't send them the stuff that we said we were going to, because we're on the hamster wheel
Yep.
and we're busy talking to people who may move in tomorrow.
Yep.
We're not delivering a brand experience that is going to be like what you'll have when you live in the community.
Yeah, it's really important. I think a lot of times when I do positioning or, we're doing our marketing planning, I always say, I want everyone on this meeting. And
Yeah.
that's why I don't want to have anything in the marketing messaging
Mhm.
on the website, which is pretty much
Right.
everyone's first impression of you, that hasn't come from the operations team who
Yeah.
works with the residents. I'm talking dining, maintenance. I want all of them in.
Right.
Because that's where you hear the golds. Like a lot of times we'll talk and I'm like, and they'll say, I don't know if anyone's watched the positioning episode, they'll say, oh, we've got great care. We've got great food. We've got, no. Like what is the differentiator here?
Right.
And when you start to hear the operation team talking, you're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is gold. This is what the marketing
Yes.
means, and vice versa. So marketing should not be putting anything out in terms of branding, positioning, messaging that they don't feel the prospect will feel when they come to
Right.
the community. So true. And I think now it's even more important than ever is that transparency, that authenticity. People can see right through it, especially this generation.
Yes.
And we just need to make sure we are partnering ops, sales, and marketing all together. We're saying the same thing. We're doing the same thing. We're on the same page. We're supporting each other, like you're saying, with the sales team and the coaching to help everyone through this process, because it's a hard process. So, no, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wasn't going to get into the marketing side, but I had to pull it out because they work so seamlessly together.
Yes.
And that's something, me having both sides experience, I'm like, this, you can't be saying these things. We can't be doing these things in marketing, because that's not what they're going to get when they come here. And we want to be talking about having that consistency of voice and experience, like you're saying. So it's truly, you're selling a lifestyle and an experience. That's what why they're moving there. So let's not make the sales team's, lives any harder by them having to fix and flub and change and that's not what we actually do. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I do want to end today. Is there any, we've talked about a lot of different topics and things today. Are there any other, tips or coaching, or is there anything that we missed that you want to bring to mind, that you do when you're coaching with your sales teams that we didn't mention? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I would love to just talk about coaching a little bit before we end today. Coaching is a term that's thrown out often. Coaching conversation can mean a corrective conversation. Coaching conversation can mean I'm going to come in and show you how to do it. Or a coaching conversation can actually be I'm going to coach you through effective questions that are going to help you to be better at what you do, and the things you decide to do are going to be better than what I might have told you, because they're going to come from you who have the daily experience of being on the ground. And so I think, it's taken a while, I think, for true coaching to come into the senior living industry. I think still there's a lot of misunderstandings of what coaching can be. And I think that when we again consider how much we invest in team members in our training, to not have an effective coaching process as the ride along to your training makes your training not stick. Right.
Yeah.
It's just not going to stick because you don't do it all the time. And, without allowing a salesperson to practice saying some of these things, asking some of the difficult questions, providing answers about programs that you have in your community, you are left with your sales professionals practicing on your customers. Because the only time they're saying or telling the right question is when they're with the customer. When they're with you, the leader, they're saying, well, what I would do, well, what I generally say, versus let's just practice saying it. Let's just saying it. Practice asking those difficult questions over and over and over again. Sort of like sports drills. right? When you think about sports, like things are broken down into really small, bite-sized chunks, and they practice just that piece of it. So I think that that's something that I hope that the industry begins to really acknowledge, that it is not just a one and done. You could have the greatest training in the world. Only 20% of it's going to stick if you don't have a process that really enforces that growth that you need to see and the maturity of being able to ask those questions. So didn't want to let the time get by without talking
Yeah,
about that
well,
a
no, I
little
mean,
bit.
it's true,
Yeah.
right? How do we all learn best? I don't know if everyone's this way, but most people learn best by
Mhm.
doing something. I mean, I've had to learn a lot of tools with podcasts and all of this, and the best way to learn is to literally do it. When I watch videos
Yeah.
or I'm reading how to do it, I'm like, I don't, what is this, saying? So I believe
Yeah.
it. I mean, that makes sense, and we need to be
Yeah.
better at that. And people don't want to spend the money on that. I think operators don't think
Right.
they want to
Yeah.
cut those things, like
Right.
like I talked about before with marketing. They want to cut a lot of those tools that are
Yeah.
strong conversion tools. And then they want to cut those things
Right.
like coaching that's going to
Yeah.
really elevate the sales team, cut staff that's going to
Yeah.
elevate the sales team. So no, I'm really glad you brought
Absolutely.
that up. I think
Yeah.
that's really important. So I want to end today. Are there
Mhm.
any, okay, we're at the end of the episode. Are there any,
Yep.
final key takeaways you want our listeners to remember from this episode today?
Yeah, I think this would my number one advice, right, would be make sure that you truly understand how your customers wanna be communicated with, and build structure and processes that get them the information that they need when they want it. I think without that, right, again, you've got this nurturing lead time, which sounds really nice, right? We're gonna nurture our leads, but putting the time and effort into those customers that are going to buy in 60, 90, 120, 2 years from now really should be every bit as important as the prospective resident that you're talking to today, and should have the same amount of discussion on both of those kinds of opportunities that the directors of sales get when they're working with customers every day.
Thank you. No,
Yeah.
this has been extremely helpful for me too. I was just saying all these episodes, I feel like I learned so much talking to you. So thank you so much, Kelly, for joining the podcast today. And don't forget to get her book, The
Mm.
More You Know, The More You
You
Close by
close.
Kelly Myers. Thank you again so much. And thank you everybody for watching another episode of the Drake Insights podcast. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye. Real quick, if you enjoyed watching the podcast today, please follow me and subscribe so you're notified for the next podcast. And if you have any questions or want to talk after about anything that Drake Strategic can provide for you, please reach out to me, call me, email me, or visit our website at drakestrategic.com.